What is up everyone, it is me DevilNeverCry, and in this video I'm going to be giving you my top tips for beginners to Ninja Gaiden 4. If you primarily want tips for combat, then I've made a separate video for that entirely, which will likely be out by now and linked in the description. This video is aimed at beginners who are new to Ninja Gaiden or perhaps need a bit of a refresher. With all that said and done though, let's dive in. This first tip might seem a little bit obvious, but let me explain. Every time you come across a shrine somewhere in the game and get a chance to speak to Umi, you need to accept every mission that you see. These are essentially small little side quests that you can do whilst tackling the general objective for the chapter. The reason I suggest you accept them immediately as soon as you see them is because I don't believe the objectives for the side missions are actually instanced in that chapter until they are accepted at a shrine terminal. Which means that if you don't accept them, you actually might miss out. These missions are usually quite simple or straightforward. They'll typically ask you to fight a specific set of enemies or to find things either in that specific chapter or in later ones. And they usually come with some rewards that are worth going for, either accessories, ninja coins that you can use for things like skills or items, or even in some instances you get items that can be used to help upgrade your maximum health. So definitely don't skip out on the missions, and as a reminder, you only get rewards once you actually head back to a terminal after completing one of these side missions and then cashing them in. My second tip kind of ties into this anyway, that is that you need to be exploring often. And as an added tip, and one that's actually probably worth keeping in mind, is that if you ever come across a place somewhere in a chapter where there are multiple paths to take, and you're not sure which way you're supposed to be going, then make sure you use the automatic pathfinder, I believe by holding down one of the sticks, and then go the opposite way that it tells you to go to ensure that you don't follow the story and accidentally get locked out of going down that optional path. You'll want to explore as pretty much all of the side missions and their objectives will typically lay off of the beaten path. That's also not to mention the fact that there is an abundance of chests that you'll likely miss out on if you don't go ahead and explore. These chests will typically house a plethora of items to help you along your way. Usually items to help you heal, sometimes you'll have items that can help buff your attack or your defense for a specific amount of time, but even if you don't need them, perhaps you're, too good at the game or whatever, they'll give you additional ninja coins if you already have the limit of that specific item, which can then be used to buy things like other items or, more importantly, skills. Speaking of skills, and as I previously mentioned, I have made a whole guide more geared towards combat for beginners, which you should definitely check out if you can. But if there is one thing from that video that I want to carry over into this one, it's that you should 100% be using the game's training mode to familiarize yourself with the game's combat mechanics. Combat, unsurprisingly, is a large part of this game, and if you don't understand certain concepts, you might struggle unnecessarily. Training mode can literally be accessed anywhere, not just at Crow's. If you hit the pause button and then you head into the systems menu, you'll be able to dive straight into training mode. Just keep in mind that it will kind of cancel out some progress and throw you back to a specific checkpoint once you exit training mode. Getting back on the topic of training mode in the terminal store, I highly recommend that you prioritize buying skills over items. As previously mentioned, items can be found almost anywhere and they are not really unique. What I mean by that is that you'll typically find a lot of these items everywhere, whereas skills, once you buy them, you have them permanently and you're not going to be able to find them anywhere else. Ultimately, they're far more valuable in the long run, considering the game's focus on combat, and also having a lack of a bit of a buffer of those items in some instances can kind of force you to adapt and play better. My next tip pertains to weapon experience and specific skills. There is another system at play here beyond buying skills with your ninja coins that allows you to gain specific abilities for individual weapons through the use of weapon experience. Now, during my initial playthrough, I made the mistake of thinking that weapon experience can only be built by defeating enemies with that specific weapon, but that is not the case. You build up weapon experience regardless of which weapon you use, which can then be used to buy individual skills for different weapons at will. So just keep that in mind. But to draw a line under that point, if you ever find yourself left wanting for more ninja coins or perhaps more weapon experience, then try and seek out the Gates of Purgatory. If you look around each of the game's chapters hard enough, then they'll be hard to miss. Big glowing gates that will whisk you away to the underworld, and you'll be put against a series of different waves of enemies. The main caveat here is the ability to sacrifice health for greater rewards. You can go into Purgatory and face these enemies with your full amount of health, and you'll gain a moderate amount of ninja coins and weapon experience. However, you're able to incrementally choose how much health you want to give away. Perhaps you want to go in there with a 15% health cap, maybe 30%, 60%, so on and so forth. Just keep in mind that the Purgatory fights later on in the game are going to be much harder than those that you first initially come across. Though the difficulty of this is somewhat softened by the fact that during these fights you can use whatever items you want, and conveniently enough you can purchase items and skills just outside of the fight itself. I lied. There's actually a second tip that I want to give you for combat that I think is quite important, and that is that you really should focus on dodging more than blocking. Not only is it a far more reliable way to get away from damage and avoid damage entirely, but it means that you're not going to be left stationary, where blocking in this game leaves you completely immobile, and it's not going to be long before you start finding waves of enemies that can basically whittle away your guard and break it completely in a matter of seconds. And that's not even factoring in the enemies that have moves that can immediately guard break or perhaps even grab you. Pressing and holding the item button will open up the inventory wheel, but if you find this cumbersome and you already have the item that you want to use equipped and ready right next to your health bar, then simply tapping the button will automatically use it without having to slow down the combat or the gameplay all too much. The Berserk state in this game is pretty much akin to a lot of other enhanced modes that you've seen in other games, like DevilNeverCry's Devil Trigger. However, where I've found the most amount of utility out of this mode is through the Bloodbath Slaughter move, which is a move that does a lot of damage to enemies surrounding Yakumo at the cost of using all of his remaining Berserk. So just keep that in mind if you want to take out a large chunk of a boss's health, or if you face insurmountable odds and want to try and clear up the room and give yourself some breathing space. And with that, we round out my top tips for beginners in Ninja Gaiden 4. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and consider subscribing for more Ninja Gaiden 4 content, and let me know down in the comments below if there's anything that you think I've missed that you would definitely include yourself. As previously mentioned, if you are a beginner who's looking for more combat tips, then be sure to check the link in the description. With all that said and done, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.